Hey everyone, you're watching a note-taking system video. One of my big goals throughout high school has been to develop a note-taking system that meets the best note-taking system criteria. So I've decided that it's got to be aesthetic, efficient, organized, and adaptable. And after a lot of modification and thinking to make the system absolutely perfect in order to meet those criteria, I've settled on this Mistral method, and I'm super proud of it. I can pretty much say it's a good system because I've been using the same one for about 2 years now for all of my subjects, and it works perfectly. So I'm really happy with how it's turned out. So here's what I'll cover in case you want to skip to a certain part. I'm gonna go right into the system that I use, which I call very humbly the Mistral method. And for the system, I've got 4 parts. First of all is how I lay out the page and the information, the color coding system, the pens and highlighters that work well together, and finally the bullet system and signifiers that I use for the method. So let's go on to the really exciting stuff, which is how I actually lay out everything in my note-taking system. So number 1, the layout of the page and the information. I always start with some loose graph paper or lined paper. The most important thing though is that it's reorganizable. So in this journal, the pages can be removed. And by keeping it on loose paper, I can also remove things from my binder if I need, or reorganize them with the handouts that I get in class. So the first thing I do when I get my sheet of paper out is I draw a line down the left side of the page, kind of like a margin. This is the basis for the Cornell system of note-taking. You can search that up. Basically, how that works is on the left side, you've got questions that you can use to study from. On the right side is just your regular notes, and at the bottom, there's like a summary of what is in those notes. I always skip out on the summary because I don't really see a point. It's kind of like rewriting, and as I said, I don't like doing that. So I just do the one line down the side. Then I usually put the date in the top left corner. Sometimes, so I don't use a new sheet of paper for new notes. Sometimes I'll start about halfway through the sheet and I'll just put the date right there where I start. So today is October the 22nd, so I've written that there. Next, I would write the teacher. Now, if it's for a subject like economics where I keep all of my notes in one binder, I don't write the teacher because I already know who the teacher is. But in my literature journal where I have notes from all kinds of things, different lectures and different teachers, I write the teacher's name above as well, or the professor's name. So for example, in this lecture, I wrote down the professor's name and the date. And then I would just go ahead and take the notes regularly on the right side. Now the difference between the right-hand side and the left-hand side might be a little difficult to understand. So what I do on the right-hand side is take regular notes. This means that I also write headings. So for example, my title is Mistral Method, handwritten notes. And then I've got several subtitles, including why is this such an awesome system, parts of the system, and that's about it. So those are my headings, or my titles. And those are important to put in the right-hand side because they separate pieces of information that are different. And originally in the Cornell system, you are supposed to put those in the left-hand side. However, I like the right-hand side to have a sense of continuity still. So on the left-hand side, I only write down things that indicate what is on the right-hand side, but they only sort of jog my memory. So this is really helpful when I'm going back over it to study. It's easy to refer to certain parts, and it's also good to help organize the information and allow me to summarize what it is that I learned. But ultimately, there isn't really a very set rule for anything, because really when you take notes, it's not about following rules, but laying the information out in an organized way. So don't worry too much if what you write on the left-hand side is more of like a heading as opposed to a topic. If anything, you can write it in both parts. And then finally, you'll notice at the very bottom, I wrote a section for practice questions, and this is in blue, and I'll talk about my color coding system next. Oh, and also the way I make sure that things are neat, even when the teacher is talking really quickly, is I tend to wait for the teacher to finish writing whatever they're writing on the board, or sort of finish talking about their topic, and then decide the best way to lay it out, because sometimes the way they do it on the board isn't actually the best way to organize the information in your notes. So let's move on to the color coding system and the pens or highlighters that work well together. I have a section in my bullet journal dedicated to this. And I kept this in here because a few years ago when I was still modifying the system, I would sometimes change it and I would have to refer back here just to remember what it is that I changed so that I would get into memorizing the system so I wouldn't have to refer to this eventually over time. So there's the highlighting system, the pen system, and the sticky note system. So in terms of highlighters, I use the Zebra mild liners, and these are absolutely awesome. These are the colors that I bring to school with me, and they're from 2 of the sets. So these come in sets of about 5, and all of the colors are sort of similar. So these came in a set together, and these came in a set together. And these are the ones that I've pulled out from those sets that I really like. And then for pens, I use the Muji 0.38 retractable pens. These are super, super good. They're really thin, and honestly, they make my notes so neat. And another really, really cool thing about this system is that it's super efficient. So I've made sure that whatever items I'm highlighting are things that I can indicate afterwards, like after I've written my original notes. So when I take notes, I don't even need my highlighters. I don't really use these 2 colors regularly. So whenever I go somewhere to take notes, all I need is these 3 colors. And once I've taken notes with these 3 colors, then I can go in and highlight afterwards. And that's something you can do after to review your notes. So you'll notice I've already sort of done one aspect of my color coding system, which is the pens. So black is for regular notes, as it says here. Pink is for additions to the notes or extra information. This includes examples and things that the teacher mentions. And I also use pink for my questions. So I'll talk about questions more when I talk about sticky notes because that's when it becomes relevant. And then the blue is what I use for key points, textbook questions, or discussion questions. So here I've used blue to indicate this discussion question. So this is something that might have come up in class or the teacher might have mentioned when to type or handwrite notes. And then I also use blue for practice questions. So these were practice questions that the teacher might have given us. As for key points, I just sort of keep that in case I want something that stands out even more than the pink, and the blue can still be used as like a key header or something of that sort. The red and the blue I use for quotes. So for example, in my literature journal, if I'm taking notes on something or if I'm brainstorming my essay, I'll use the blue to distinguish quotes so that I don't have to put them in little quotation marks and it's harder to find them if they're in regular black. And then the red is for corrections that I make. So if I'm correcting a practice question, I'll use red. Once I've done this, we can go ahead and highlight. So I'm gonna go over really quickly the highlighting system. I use this color, which is more of like a green-blue, for formulas and dates. I use a light blue for definitions. I don't know why definitions have always been blue for me. I use a purple for a key, for like a main topic or title. And then for a subtopic or a key event, I'll use the dark blue. For a key person, I'll use the pink. For important information, I'll use the yellow. And then for any signifiers or statistics or to-do list items, or even like for boxes around certain things, or like quotations, I'll use the gray. As I said, this method works for everything. So I don't actually use all of these colors for every single subject. In my econ notes, for example, you'll notice that the only highlighters that I use are these ones. You'll notice I even highlight on my sticky notes because it lets me see what the title of the sticky notes is. So for this in particular, it's formulas to know, and I just want it to stand out, so that's why I put it on a sticky note. that's about it. It's not overwhelming, it's just the key things are highlighted. And also for the titles, I don't actually highlight the titles themselves. I've really been digging doing this kind of highlighting on the titles, so that's what I do. And you'll notice this is the main topic of the note, and these are the subtopics because they're in dark blue. For sticky notes, I bring this container to school. This is from Muji, and it's really, really cool. The only thing, it doesn't fit my big sticky notes, but I just keep those in my pencil case. I used to have a very distinct system for my sticky note colors as well, but now I just sort of do my best to keep it similar to the highlighting and the pen system. So I use green for any kind of questions that I have, and then all my other colors, I just pick whatever I want to make it aesthetic. For questions, I write my questions on a green sticky note, and then once I've answered it, I either leave it on there and write the answer below, or if it's a really important question, I'll add it into the notes in pink. Pink indicates that it was a question, and then I'll write my answer in black. And I'll use signifiers to lay this out, which brings me to my next point, which is the bullet system and the signifiers that I use. So for my bullet system, I used to use dashes, but since this system is adaptable, I use bullets because it looks better in my bullet journal, and in my bullet journal I use this exact same system. The dots just mean that it's a note in my bullet journal, and so in my notes the dots also mean that it's a note. My sub-bullets are either arrows like this, which are like sub-arrows, or arrows like this. And then the diagrams I insert wherever I think it looks good. Now, the main part in terms of signifiers that I use, besides just like stars or exclamation marks for things I want to stand out, is I use these things called discussion questions. So while I'm taking the notes, I use the pink or the blue to write my questions or the discussion questions from the textbook or from the teacher. And then next to them, on the inside of the left margin, I'll write a number. And these numbers correspond to from this particular note or from this chapter, depending on how many discussion questions I think I'm gonna have. I will order them. So this is my first discussion question, my second discussion question. And then this solves the problem of having to leave space for the discussion question answer. So I'll write the question like this, I'll write the number 2 and circle it, and then I'll continue just writing my notes. This allows for it to be really efficient. When I've finally got the answer, or when I've, if there's any section of my notes that is relevant to the answer, I'll write in black the same number 2. So this blue 2 corresponds to this black 2. Sometimes if there's a really, really big answer to the question, I'll draw a line covering all of the section where that question was answered. So for example, in this note, in my literature journal, I had a discussion question posed by the teacher that said specifically what's happening in this conflict. And then the answer was quite long, so I did this to show what is the answer and what is just a regular note. And some of these were just things that I brainstormed, and some of them were things that we brainstormed together in class. And as you can see, I use the dark blue for quotes. I want to talk about something that's really important, and that is how you write. So I just can't imagine studying from something that is written in full sentences. So do your best to write point form. It'll make it really easy to study. And also, don't write what you already know. But if you're interested in more of this kind of stuff, let me know what specifically in the comments below you want to see, and I'll be sure to film a video about that as well. So thank you so much to all of you Mistral spirits for tuning in and watching. I'm just, oh my goodness, I'm so blown away by the support from you all, and I couldn't have asked for a better community to be a part of. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe and like and comment if you enjoyed. It helps me out a lot. And check out my blog and Instagram too if you like what I do and you want to keep updated with what I'm creating that's not on YouTube. Love you all so much. Bye-bye.